Thanks so much for listening to the Wild Health Podcast. If you're a Wild Health patient, you might not know, but you have access to our referral program. This gets your friends and family 25% off Wild Health services. Just head to Clarity, and in the top right corner, you'll see Refer a Friend. Click there, and you'll be brought to a page with your referral code. Happy sharing. Ben Askins, how are you? The dude abides.
I am living the dream, one nightmare at a time, as always.
All right, you introduced. This should be short and sweet, but you never know when the two of us start talking or text threading. As the other day was a solid indication. I have a rule, by the way, with text in general, which is if I've sent or received more than 3 consecutive texts, I just call that person, because it's like, why are we still doing this?
There's
And
a
yet
threshold.
it was like binge watching Letterkenny. It was just this like guilty pleasure of texting with you the other day that I
One
really
liner after
enjoyed.
one liner after one liner.
It was an absolute meme fest. It was amazing. Anyway, you introduced a concept when we were together in Sedona that I had previously been unfamiliar with, which is this concept of pace. And I think you introduced it in the setting of sort of and I don't know if it's a military origin, but sort of the military background of this way of planning and contingency planning. And then it kind of spun me off onto this crazy tangent of all the other ways you could apply this philosophy and approach into your life. So you want to give us just a quick background on PACE as you came to it, and sort of what it actually is, and then we can kind of explore from there.
Yeah, sure. So PACE is just an acronym that we use in the military pretty commonly for planning different aspects of operations. Most commonly, it's around communication planning. So it's having a primary, an alternate, a contingent, and an emergency way of communicating with the various elements that you're conducting a mission with. Getting resupply from higher headquarters, talking to other units that you may be involved in patrols with, and you just have a plan ahead of time for how you're going to conduct communication amongst yourselves. But there's ways of doing that with weapon systems, or with what this translates into a whole lot of other contexts, which is where I think you want to take this to. Like, I'll give you the like the basic commo example from the military is we've got like our primary way of communicating is with a TACSAT radio that's encrypted and has long range, and that's why it's primary. It's the most secure and most reliable way of communicating at that level. If it goes down or isn't working properly, we have team radios. That's our alternate way of talking. Those are also encrypted but have less range, so that's why we use them as alternate instead of primary. Contingent winds up usually being like an FM radio on an open channel, not real secure, but has more range, so that's why it winds up being contingent. And then the emergency plan winds up being something that you can reliably count on. So it's a satellite phone, but that you wouldn't necessarily consider as the ideal situation as being on this satellite phone for every little call that you're going to make to somebody else, right? So it's pretty reliable. It can be, like they can hack it in real time, so it's not super secure. So that's why it winds up being the emergency. And the idea really is that your primary, whatever context we're talking about, the primary thing you're using is the ideal. But we recognize that Murphy's Law is a reality, and anything that can go wrong will go wrong. So we have all these other plans. And then the emergency step winds up being something you can implement, you can rely on, even when everything else is going sideways. The emergency option's there, and then you just sort of stuff to not ideal options in between. There is how you make most PACE plans. Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, that was the thing. As soon as I started making some pace plans, I'm really relieved to hear that last bit of your summary. That's sort of how it seemed to me. Was there's what do I want to do in an ideal situation? What can I be sure I can get done if everything goes to hell? And then, does it matter if it's alternate or contingency? Aren't those kind of the same things?
Right. So sometimes the plan winds up being like, primary is we've got radios. Alternate is I'm going to shout at you as loudly as I can, but maybe we're in an environment where you won't be able to hear me. So contingent is we have hand and arm signals that we'll use, but maybe we're in an environment where you won't be able to see me. So the emergency is I'm going to run to where you are and I'm going to shout at you from there. And I know I can do that anytime. It's just a lot more work than if the doggone radios work in the first place, or you can see or hear me without me having to do that, you know?
Makes perfect sense. Yeah, I mean, I started spinning out on this in terms of sort of short-term daily pace plans as well as sort of longer-term goals pace plans. And I just think it's a great framework to, or it has been for me, to make sure that I am making at least the minimal satisfactory progress on whatever that it is that's important to me. So I'll give you like a really simple example. You know that I have a contemplative practice. I like to meditate. I like to do breath work. I like to do yoga. There's all sorts of things that I like to do. But you also know that I have a job and a family, and life gets in the way of finding time to carve out for those sorts of things that are me time. So I have a daily pace plan around contemplative practice or mindfulness where primary is I'm going to sit for 45 minutes. It's going to be completely quiet in my house other than ambient noise and birds and the dog. And everything's going to be turned off and nobody's going to bother me and I'm going to meditate. Emergency is I'm going to go into the bathroom to take a shower at some point over the course of the day. And while I'm in the shower, I'm going to take like 10 or 15 really conscious breaths and just really focus on the water and the feel of the water on my body. And that's going to be my moment of contemplative practice. And then, yeah, contingency and alternate are usually like, I'm going to sit for 10 minutes or I'm going to go for a walk outside and not have headphones and turn off my phone and et cetera. And I kind of feel like I substitute the alternate and contingency all the time just for flavor. Those are the spices, but,
Right.
but
Yeah.
having a primary and emergency, and there's something for me at least really just relaxing and relieving about knowing that I'm going to do something today. And even if my goals get, my idealized goals get completely trashed because, something comes up at work or the kids need to go someplace that I hadn't remembered or whatever else, there's always something to fall back on. So I'm just curious, do you feel like you incorporate this strategy into your life, or is it just something kind of that's a vestige of the military training and it's there when you're active duty, but otherwise it's kind of out the door?
No, it's definitely something that's translated into a whole bunch of other avenues of my life really meaningfully because I I don't know. I tend to be an all or nothing sort of person
That
historically.
doesn't sound like you at all, Ben.
And this has helped me moderate a bit and be, more human around some of this stuff instead of unrealistic and unreasonable with myself around what expectations I set. But I think there's an impulse in all of us to kind of set whatever our primary goal is, and then to have like primary and emergency is all that there is. Like if I don't get into the college of my dreams, I'll just be homeless and never have make anything of myself. Like we can catastrophize really quickly if we don't have the primary happening, but it helps even at the outset just to in your planning phases to recognize that there's a whole bunch of alternatives beyond just all or nothing. There's all these ways that you can kind of infinitely parse out the space between 0 and 1, right?
Yeah,
Something
yeah,
is infinitely more than nothing. So you look at whatever the plan might be. I'm always thinking in terms of alternates, contingencies, and emergencies for whatever I'm looking at, whether it's professional opportunities, education opportunities, anything that you have to apply for in the first place, or just ways that I'm planning the vacation. Do we get the house that we want? Do we not? Do we pay for this that way? Parenting styles wind up being influenced by like, okay, so my kid is planning on this, but what are some ways to catch her if it doesn't quite go the way that she's planning it, and it's not just a catastrophe and it's not just straight to emergency all the time.
yeah. I love that. I think I can't remember who said this. I'm paraphrasing, but I definitely not my line. But nobody lives the future they imagine. And I think it's so easy to get to just be hard on yourself or get unmotivated when you've got these plans. Think about sort of New Year's resolutions, and just you wake up in the morning and think, today I'm gonna go for a 6 mile run outdoors and it's going to be amazing. And then something else happens and you don't. And I think just having those backup plans and even an emergency plan that's still pretty positive just gives yourself the permission to let life's craziness get in your way, because you're fooling yourself anyway if you think that it's not that you have any control over it. But you do manage to keep a pretty, I don't know, a moving forward outlook out of doing these plans. So I'd encourage people listening, if this is interesting. If it's not, don't worry, because we're almost done. But if it is, you can do this around really anything. And I think just pick something in your life you want to do it for tomorrow, and you can think about doing sort of 3-month goals and pace plans around your 3-month goals or whatever in longer term. But even just like what you want to eat tomorrow, how you want to eat, right? Or what sort of training you want to do tomorrow, or what sort of stress reduction or spiritual practice you want to do. I think I found it to be a really fun exercise, and was really glad you brought it into my life. So wanted to thank you and hear more about it.
Yeah, for sure. There's only two things I'd add. One is that in team situations is where a pace plan is really useful, because everybody's got mapped out, right? Whatever the situation might be. Maybe it's you're working together on a project, and you know that if we don't meet this particular metric, it's not the end of the project necessarily, but there's an alternate and a contingent option that we've all mapped out together ahead of time, and we're all ready. And all that it really takes is saying, hey, we're just going to switch from primary to alternate at this point, and everybody knows, oh, we're moving to this other channel, we're moving to this other thing, and it doesn't involve a whole lot of effort reinventing the wheel at the time whenever you don't want to be reinventing wheels. Like if we need to make this change quickly, that's why we had it in the plan in the first place. And then the other thing that's helpful sometimes to incorporate into planning that we don't really do much of anymore in the age of cell phones being in our pockets and ready all the time is what we call a no comms plan. And it's planning everything ahead of time in a way that counts on the fact that your battery's going to die, or that counts on the fact that your phone's not going to have service, right? Like you and I are old enough to remember, like if we wanted to go to the movies when we were teenagers, like I would look up what time the movie was going to play, and I'd call you and say, hey, Mike, my mom said she could drop me off at the theater at this time, and she said she could give you a ride home. You want to ask your mom if it's okay for you to go see Total Recall this weekend with me or whatever? We'd make the whole
Total
plan.
Recall.
We'd make the whole plan in like 60 seconds on the phone together. And then we would execute that plan where, like, right now, everybody talks on their phone like, hey, yo, what's up? What time's the movie? What movie? This weekend, Saturday or Sunday? Or there's all this, there's 45 text messages back and forth to arrive at what if you had a no comms plan in place was just, yeah, we'll be here at this time and in this place. And if we're not, go ahead and watch the movie without us, or whatever the plan might be, right? Instead of like no news is good news, you make a plan for no news actually means we do primary, alternate, contingent, emergency, whatever those sorts of things might be at that point. So that can be helpful in planning. Beyond the pace plan is also the what if you don't hear anything, what do you do then plan.
Yeah, I miss those days. I'm very excited. I'm going to be without cell service in a couple of weeks for about 6 days, and I don't know. There's something super, super, super comforting about that in this day and age.
Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'm going to make a pace plan for the next topic we're going to talk about, but I'll do it offline, and we'll have a shared mental model. And when we need to switch to alternate, there'll be no going through all the Kubler-Ross stages. We'll just be right there and ready to pull the trigger.
I'm just going to scream emergency as soon as you start recording, and we'll know what to do.
Sounds like a plan. Awesome. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it.
Cheers, brother.
Thanks for listening to the Wild Health Podcast. If you found it helpful, give us a 5-star rating and write a review on iTunes. It really helps the podcast, and we greatly appreciate it. If you want to be a client or you want to work with us, go to wildhealth.com. Thanks again.